My name is Vera Aronow, and I am the board chair of Rivertown Film, which is the Rockland County nonprofit that's dedicated to celebrating the art of motion pictures through screenings and educational programs. We thank all of you for coming. We thank our members and our sponsors for their backing, and we especially want to mention our thanks to the New York State Council on the Arts. Rivertown will turn 20 years old later in 2021, so we hope you'll check out our website and sign up for our e-news so you can hear about all our future programs as well. Tonight, we're discussing the documentary Us Kids, which started streaming through a link May 21st, link on our website. It's still going, and it will keep going for probably another week, maybe even longer, depending on interest. So you still have time to watch it if you haven't, or to tell your friends and family if they might be interested. We're grateful tonight to have Shari, Maurer, and Jaden Turner here to talk with us about the film and the issues it raises. Shari Maurer is the local group leader for Rockland County and a local group manager for New York State for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. She's also a literary agent and a writer. Jaden Turner was one of the student speakers at the Rockland County March for Our Lives in 2018 after her cousin, Alyssa Al-Hedef, was killed in Parkland. She's currently the co-lead for the Rockland County Students Demand Action and also a junior at Nyack High School. Moms Demand Action is a nonprofit, nonpartisan grassroots movement of Americans fighting for public safety measures that can protect people from gun violence and also seeking solutions to address our nation's culture of gun violence. So tonight what we'll do is I have prepared a few questions, so I'll ask a couple of questions just to get started, and then we'll open it up to questions or comments from everybody else. And you're welcome to put a question in the chat if you like, or when the time comes to raise your hand, and we'll recognize people one by one. And just please keep yourself muted unless you're specifically asking a question. So I just wanted to start out by asking Shari and then Jaden, how did you get involved in this issue? What gave you the courage to stand up and make this a signature issue to act on? If you've seen the film, the young people went through horrible trauma and chose, despite these great difficulties, to lead a movement. What made you take this on?
I'll start if that's okay, Jaden. So in January of 2018, there was yet another school shooting, this one in Kentucky. And sort of as that happened, I happened to be listening to a podcast with Jason Kander, whose big thing is called Majority 54, is grab an oar. And so his thing is, how can you get involved and make your community better? And he had Shannon Watts on the podcast, and she's the founder of Moms Demand Action. And what she was talking about was the fact that while federally they were struggling and didn't work, they were being really, really effective on the state level. And they were able to block bad bills, get good bills passed. And I was impressed by that. So I did what you do, which is I went on the internet and said, I wonder if they're meeting in Rockland County. And of course, they weren't, because not a lot happens in Rockland at times, but they were meeting in Westchester. So I got Lori Puka, who's here on the Zoom. And one Sunday, I think it was, we went over to Yonkers, to the library, and we went to this meeting. And it was so well run. It was so impressive, the way they sort of had us each at tables, and they came and spoke to us, and we did elevator pitches and learned about the language you use. And in fact, Shelley Katz is here, and she was one of the presenters. And I remember it so well, just how blown away I was by the structure of it. So I said to Lori, and there was actually 2 other people there from Rockland, I was like, we've got to do this in Rockland. So I came home, and the next day I was like, we're doing this. We're starting a Facebook group. We're adding people. And they said, slow down. And I said, well, I don't work slow. Like, I don't have that speed. I want to do this now. And again, I'm reminding you, this was late January of 2018. And the reason why I say that is because 2 weeks later, the shooting happened in Parkland. And then it was all anybody could do to really become a part of this movement, sadly. And what happened in Rockland County, and again, and we know that while it's easy to go to Westchester and to New York City and to Washington, D.C. for these things, there's something special about having it in your community. And there was a woman named Nicole Kissick who was determined to do a March for Our Lives in Rockland. And so we got together with her and a man named Steve Gold and a journalist named Robin Traum. And together we said, all right, let's figure out if we can do this. And in planning it, we realized that like the national movement and watching the kids in Parkland, we really wanted this to be student empowered. And one of the students we met was Jaden, and we met her through her dad. Her dad was speaking to a group of students who were starting to kind of come together, realizing this was an issue. And I said to him, do you think Jaden would feel comfortable speaking? And I have to say, I'm so grateful she was, because she's become such a voice for this movement and for school safety and for anti-gun violence. And so, I'm thrilled that happened. And if any of you were there in Rockland County, we had about 3,000 people at that march. They said it was the largest gathering at the courthouse since the Vietnam War. So It just showed you how passionate people were about the cause. And then sort of as time went on, we formed a really strong chapter or group they call local group in Rockland County. And we've been working with our elected officials. We've been working on our gun safety platform called Be Smart to get the word out about that. We just, in 2018, we worked our tushies off and flipped the New York State Senate. And in early 2019, they passed 9 new gun laws that are, again, helping to keep our community safe, including the Extreme Risk Protection Order Act. And that has been amazing. And one of the things we'll do now that the pandemic is hopefully winding down is we really want to get the word out on how people can use that, because it's a tool people have if they're concerned that their loved one is a risk to themselves or to others. We just have to educate people on how to use it. So that's kind of what's going on in Rockland. We have an amazingly engaged, intelligent group of, it's not just moms, we call mothers and others. It's moms, it's dads, it's aunts, it's uncles. And it's been a really rewarding time in Rockland County. Jaden, you want to talk about, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I got involved like pretty much right after the Parkland shooting happened, because my cousin was killed. I kind of like don't remember a lot at the beginning. I just remember like being told to show up places, to be honest. I did, and I like really had like no idea what I was doing. But I feel like I've definitely like learned a lot from the experiences that I've had. And the first thing I did was I spoke at March for Our Lives in Rockland, which I was actually very, very hesitant to do. And I did not decide till about 1 o'clock that morning that I was actually going to do it. But by doing that, I was able to get involved with Youth Against Gun Violence, which was what was started in Rockland and then kind of transitioned into Students Demand Action. And I've just been able to get more and more involved in Students Demand Action. And I'm now working in the state virtual field office. So I've gotten to work on some state projects, and we're working on a Students Demand Action Advocacy Day to recruit more students, which is really exciting. And I've also been able to work on an organization called Make Our Schools Safe, which was started after the Parkland shooting to honor my cousin Alyssa. And I've been able to work on school safety. So that's kind of like how I got involved.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable. That's a lot. And I'm sure it's really, right, as you say, you've grown and learned from it. So it must be incredible on a level of personal development as well as making a difference. The next thing I wanted to ask about, which I assume everybody here is interested in, what are some of the particular challenges in Rockland County? How does gun violence come up, as an issue here, and what are the particular things that you think about wanting to do to address them? Is there anything particular to Rockland County, or do you think really more on the national level?
Well, I think there's kind of 2 ways of looking at it. If you look locally, So for example, one of the things we really push hard on is gun safety and safe gun storage. And we have a program that teaches you even, how to ask a potential play date if there's guns in the houses, and it gives parents tools to do all those things. And we went to the town of Clarkstown and we said, we'd really like to do a big presentation. Would you work with us on this? And they said, absolutely. And George Homan said, that's great. We got the police department, they were in on it. And then George Homan said to us, listen, I want you to include this guy. He's the head of the United Sportsmen of America, which for you guys is it's the Friends of the NRA, but here in Rockland County. I think it's really important to give him a voice, but I have to tell you something. This is George speaking. I have to tell you something. You can't talk about policy. You need to pull back on all that. You need to just talk about safety. And we said, no problem, because we really do believe in including gun owners. We're a Second Amendment group. And so we said, no problem. And we went through our whole presentation down the line that we spoke very carefully. The Clarkstown police spoke and talked about the things that they do in the community to keep the community safe. And then this gentleman spoke and he just went after us. He criticized our organization. He criticized our safety program. He criticized our statistics. I mean, he was just awful. And we felt a little blindsided by that because here we were really coming to the table and hoping that he'd talk about the NRA's gun safety initiatives. We all have the same goal, which is to make sure nobody gets accidentally shot and nobody, So anyway, I went up to him afterwards thinking, let's just try and, get this dialogue going. And I said, I just want to say hello. And that when there was a big protest against your group, we didn't participate because we believe you have the right to meet. And I just want you to know that. And I said to him, surely you can understand, though, the need for safe storage, given that every other day there's a shooting where a kid gets into their parents' guns and shoots their sibling or their friends or their brothers. And he waved me off. He said, absolutely not. That's just the thugs in Chicago. And I just don't think this is important. And at that point, I was like, okay, we're done. Like, clearly we're not going to find common ground. So when you say, what are the challenges? I mean, I think that there are some gun owners who just hear anything, any proposed law, even if it's just something that's so reasonable or like background checks, just to reasonably prevent dangerous people from getting guns, and their hands go up and they don't want to hear it. They go, that's not that. It's, guns don't kill people, people kill people. No, whatever. Yeah. And so I think that exists locally. I think it also exists federally. And the problem we have is that, so New York now has some really good gun laws. But if any of our neighboring states don't, we're only as good as the states that don't. So Illinois has a very high issue of gun violence, particularly with illegal guns. They've got 100% background checks, universal background checks. Why is it so bad? Because Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Missouri, and Iowa don't. And so anybody can come. So what I feel very strongly about is that we need to make these laws federal. And unfortunately, that's not going to happen unless we abolish the filibuster, unless we get more senators on board. So the thing I can tell you all who are here, I mean, I'm assuming everybody's from New York, but if you can reach out to your friends and family in other states and states where the senators might not be on board and see if they can push their elected representatives, that's sort of one of the things we can do. You also can work with us, and we do make phone calls into those other states, and we do work like that. But what I see right now is that being sort of the number one priority, because we're good in New York, thank goodness.
Wow, interesting. That's interesting. I was saving this question for later, but well, I have one other thing occurred to me. When you say you're a Second Amendment group, what do you mean by that? And that came up in the film because Gonzalez was also saying in some of her conversations, or their conversations, that that they were not opposed to guns. They were not opposed to the Second Amendment. They just wanted the militia to be well regulated. Was that kind of the idea? Or?
Yeah, no, we believe in the right to bear arms. We just want it to be done by people who aren't dangerous, and we want it to be done legally, and we want there to be background checks and ways for dangerous people's guns to be taken from them should they become a danger to themselves or others. I mean, we also are very careful in our words. So we actually don't say gun control. We use the word gun sense, gun violence prevention, because control just gets everybody's back up. So we're very, very careful like that. And we're very inclusive. We have gun owners, we have Republicans and Democrats and all sorts of people just with the same goal, which is to keep us all safe from gun violence.
Thank you. Jaden, did you want to say anything about what's happening in Rockland or what you see as the...
Yeah, so I mean, I think in some ways that it's easier in Rockland than other places, but in many ways it's harder because we don't necessarily see gun violence daily, or some people have never really experienced it like affecting them at all, which is great, and I hope they never do, but it also makes it harder to get them to act on something. And there are thousands of people every day being affected by this issue, but people in Rockland County aren't necessarily part of those groups. So until they see like a school shooting or a mass shooting, they're not really ready to do anything, which makes it harder to get anything done locally. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'd rather than like never have those experiences and just choose to act because they want to prevent other people from having those experiences.
Oh, that's interesting to think about, that if people haven't been personally affected, that they're not as likely to act. So
Yeah, I think so. I got a question, which was, what are the laws like in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut? And the answer is Connecticut certainly has really good laws because of everything they went through with Sandy Hook. And New Jersey also, with their new governor, has good laws. Pennsylvania, I think, I'm looking at Shelley, not as good as we are, right? No, Shelley's saying no, we don't. They don't. So that's our Achilles heel, right? We're right on the border of Pennsylvania, and they can come on over to New York City whenever they want to. I mean, so can anybody from anywhere, but you know, your neighboring states are the ones you're more concerned about.
right, interesting point. Do we have any other questions that people want to ask at this time? I'm looking. I don't see. Am I missing someone who has their hand up? No. No. Okay. Well, this was something I wanted to ask, I guess, Jaden in particular. I mean, I think in this film, one of the biggest focuses that was different from other stories I've seen about these young people, this extraordinary group of young people who are leading this movement, was that they was how they came through this experience of trauma. And I just wondered, you know, if you wanted to comment about that, you know, how that makes a difference and how you can get through it.
I mean, I think it definitely affects the way that you act and how you're able to respond to future shootings, but also how you're acting in between them and what you choose to do. And I think like one of the biggest impacts is it gives you a reason that you kind of like have to work on ending gun violence, rather than this is just something important that we should all be aware of and we should all be trying to do.
Right. I guess, you know, I realized the other part of my question I wanted to ask, do you think is pervasive among people in your generation or people or students now in schools that that there is? I mean, I know young people experience anxiety about climate change and are leaders in the climate change movement, and also in this movement. Do you have a perspective on how your cohort is feeling about all that?
I mean, we definitely do lockdown drills, and there are some people who they make them really scared, and there's other people who will be laughing, talking through the entire thing and just like act like the whole thing's a joke, not really realizing that this is a reality and people live through it. And I think that definitely impacts people, but I also think that like my generation as a whole doesn't see it as this could really happen here, and until it does happen there. And I think there are people who are like, well, it never happens. And then they see it in the media, and then for a few weeks they're really scared that something's going to happen at their school or somewhere that they are, and then they kind of like drop it, they forget about the issue. But there are like kids in like areas like Chicago where gun violence affects them every day regardless of what the media is saying, and they don't have a chance to forget about this issue like we do here in Rockland County, where it's not something that we see all the time.
Right. Right. That's a good point. Thank you. Okay, I see somebody in the chat now saying, how do you respond when people say that gun laws don't matter because people will just get illegal guns?
I guess I can answer. I mean, I think that we can say that about anything. If we passed laws like prohibition, people got illegal alcohol and it became unhealthy, but it also wasn't well regulated. So if there were actually regulations that were enforced and people were kept to the law, I think that can make a huge difference. And I also think that there is a difference in many ways about banning guns and banning alcohol. And I think right now in the Constitution, we can't really ban guns at all. It's just not set up in that way. And it would be a really hard process. So I think that it's not even a question that we're looking at and how it would affect us. I think the question that we need to be looking at, and that we are looking at from Moms and Students Demand Action, is how we can make guns safer based on who they're around and who has access to the guns, how they're stored, so that when we do have these guns and they're in the hands of people, we know they're in the hands of people who can responsibly own the guns, and that they're not going to be accessed by children or others who aren't going to act responsibly around them.
I think also, listen, background checks work. Background checks have blocked like 3 million sales in the last several years. And, unfortunately, because online retailers are not beholden to that, that's where much of our illegal trade comes from. So if we can crack down on that too, listen, nothing's going to be 100%, but we certainly could do better than we're doing.
Joanne Franchino, I see your hand is up.
Yes, it seems that people feel loyalty to this topic, but they feel so discouraged and that it's so hopeless, and that there doesn't seem to be concrete steps until something can be done federally, and that seems almost impossible. Today, Texas, the governor passed a law that you don't need a license, you don't need to conceal the weapon, you don't have to show that you know how to use the gun. If anything, it seems like the whole push is in an opposite direction. I just, New York, I'm in the city, the numbers of, they were showing earlier on the news, 3 young children. This was from neighborhood shootings. One of the children died, the other 2 are clinging on to dear life. What is it? A number of people that I know are sympathetic to this cause, but then take no specific actions, because I don't think we're sure what actions we can take other than donating to the cause. What are there specific things that
we do? Sure. I mean, come work with us, please, because we are doing specific things, both again in New York for gun safety and for changing the laws, but also we have something called the Gun Sense Action Network. And you can take a shift every week, whenever you're available, and call these other states and try and move the conversation in these other states, because we know full well that New York's okay, but they find, we have very good people on staff at Everytown, which is part of Moms Demand, and they know which legislators we need to target right now. They sort of see where the need is. And so maybe there is hope. I mean, there's certainly hope in that we've passed a lot of state laws since Parkland, since Sandy Hook. And of course it's not enough. I mean, until it's federal, and it's not enough, but it's happening. It is happening. I want to the double negative, nothing's not happening. You know, we really are seeing some movement. And like I said, 9 laws in New York State in 2019, just because we changed the state Senate. So I do think that there is hope, but part of it is, you know, if you saw the movie, and if you have not seen this movie, go see it, because I lived through the whole thing deep in the heart of this movement. But to see these kids again was so moving and so amazing.
Okay.
But they've moved the needle with voter registration. So that's another thing that's important, is making sure, you know, our young people and just our people who are on our side on this topic are registered to vote. So there are concrete things you can do. And I have to tell you, after the 2016 election, I was absolutely distraught, and I was scrolling Twitter, and I was a mess and frustrated and whatnot. And when I started getting involved with Moms Demand and working towards preventing gun violence and having this concrete stuff to do, it just, you feel better. Like it calms you in a way, and it gives you this focus. And so if anybody's at that place, I really just recommend you, as Jason Cannon would say, grab an oar, come work with us. There are other organizations, and do that. I'm going to put in the chat both my personal email and also our Facebook group. I don't know if you guys are Facebook people, but if you're not, reach out to me via email, and we'll get you hooked in, because there is a lot of work to do. And it's the kind of thing, what I love about Moms Demand is that if you have an hour a month, great, we've got things you can do. If you have 10 hours a week, we've got things you can do. Like there's so many different roles and ways, and it's structured so beautifully. We have 6 million volunteers around the United States, and it's state by state. New York has this wonderful setup and great people working on all the levels, both in local groups and on the state stuff. And so I really just encourage everybody to come work with us.
Thank you. You know, one other thing I wonder about is, and this is, I'm just totally ignorant. I have a sense that there are federal laws that prohibit the study of gun violence and academic research into this subject, that, to better understand what would work, what would help, what doesn't work. The record keeping, the data is not up to date because of that. Am I right about that? Do you speak to that? Would that help?
I'm looking at Shelley again for the source. I think it's getting better. I think Biden put money in, and we actually have some funding for the CDC. I'm looking over Shelley, to fund research now. I know we were trying in New York State and it didn't go through. It wasn't a priority for the budget, but the federal government is looking at it again. And every town, and I'll put that website in too. They do a lot of research. So it'll be interesting if you just want to look at the statistics and some of the different laws and whatnot. That's a great website to poke around on. So I'm just going to start throwing stuff in the chat, like the Facebook group. And
thank you.
I think that one of the, the question was, how do we, that we're feeling defeated, and it seems overwhelming that how we could change things because it just keeps getting worse and worse. And that was one of the interesting things about this film, the number of kids getting involved in this issue, and to some degree maybe that's necessary, and that we do. It's the same with the climate change movement, that grown-ups are inspired by kids and also somewhat shamed by kids, that that we realize that what they're saying is true, and that we have been living sort of lying to ourselves that we can live our lives and not take a stand and get involved. And especially in these times when it feels like the country and the culture is headed the wrong direction, it's not the time to give up, because those things always happen in waves and pendulums, and we will have an opportunity, and maybe that's coming. But I especially feel heartened by the kids being so involved these days.
Oh, I see Lori Puka you have your hand up. Would you like to say something?
Thanks. I just want to add on to what Matthew and Shari said. I find this in general in my life, it can be extremely overwhelming. Climate change to me, another issue I'm involved in and care about, is super overwhelming. But I think if you start, it's a way to ground yourself. And I noticed that just in my life, a lot of people around me feel the same way. Well, and that tends to be because I hang out with people who feel like I do, but also they feel the same way as I do, but they're not doing anything. But then they see me and they sort of like, oh, Lori can do this, even if I'm not doing a lot. If I'm just going to a meeting or sending an email out, or I'm posting something on my Facebook page, you know, people will then use you as an example. And how can I help? Or they come to me for information. And I'm not saying I have any information that anybody else doesn't have, but I'm sort of answering Joanne's concern, and I understand that, but I find it when you get involved, it grounds you, and then people feel they want to get involved too, and they don't know what to do, and they're nervous, and they come to you, they ask a question, and you might want to say, hey, I'm going to this meeting, you want to come along? And they wouldn't go by themselves. And if I'm comfortable going by myself, that's great, but now they can come with me, you know? So, and even if they don't, I throw things out to people. You want to join me? And at some point people will, or they'll come out of the, I was gonna say come out of the closet, but that's, you know, it doesn't apply here, but you know what I'm saying? They'll see you, use you as an example. So I think if you can yourself say, you know what, I'm going to take the step, even if it's like Shari said, you have an hour a week and you want to write letters or postcards or make phone calls. And I think that's really helpful and grounding to you. And it satisfies me. It makes me feel like even in my small community, I'm doing something. And I've just seen a lot of people respond really positively to that. And, you know, in small ways. And it's a very satisfying feeling. And I also continue to feel that that has an impact. Every single person in any act, any gesture has an impact in a positive way to whatever the fight, so to speak, is.
Yeah, that's a beautiful statement. Shelley, you have to unmute though.
Right.
Okay.
So I was going to say that just to go back to that point, things like seatbelts or drunk driving laws and things, and people were really opposed to them when they first happened. In fact, I have a story about my own father who used to not wear a seatbelt because in his mind he felt like it was safer if you get into an accident and you need to get out of your car, you don't have to fumble for the seatbelt to be able to let yourself out. You can just let yourself out. And he did not wear a seatbelt for the longest time. And in fact, when I had my children, I remember him saying things like, well, you don't have to wear the seatbelt if you don't want to. And I was furious about that because I was like, no, my children are wearing seatbelts. And if you can't, abide by those laws, then forget about it. You're not taking my kids in the car. But my point is that there were people with very strong opinions and feelings about that. And it took a really, really long time for people to get used to that and see that as a life-saving measure. And I think the same thing goes with even drinking and driving. And, still there are people dying all the time in terms of gun violence. So this is worse than anything I can imagine for any of the others. But it's kind of the same point. Don't give up. Don't feel overwhelmed by the idea of that, because sometimes these things take a long time. And this is a fairly recent, argument that's been going on. It's not, it's Moms Demand Action is only like almost 8 years old. And, people have been fighting for common sense gun laws for a long time, but only recently have we actually made progress and really been pushing strong enough. So I feel like it's still going to happen and we can't give up.
Well, and look at the difference. Look what had the Parkland kids really went after the NRA, as do we, and Shannon Watts. And I think the conversation, I think it shifted. The views of the NRA, look, they're bankrupt, they're a mess, they're falling apart, they're vilified, people have their number, they know that they control the politicians. Like, that wasn't the case several years ago. So we're winning on that one, And the thing that Shannon Watts talks about is that, she would go, our Moms Demand people would go to state houses to speak against bills, for bills, whatever it was. And we'd show up with 30 of us and 50 of us and 100 of us. And the NRA would have 2 people. So we're a bigger army than they are. Just because they're a little loud and they want to say obnoxious things, we're bigger than them. So I think that the public sentiment's on our side. I really do.
I think also one of the things with staying involved is recognizing the smaller victories. So it's not always passing the number one law that you're pushing, because that's not always realistic. And in New York, we're lucky enough that we're able to do that a lot of the time, but across the country, we can't necessarily have the victories that we want, but recognizing the laws that we do pass. And even if it's not a legislative victory, there's so many things that we're able to do throughout the year that do make an impact. And if something that we do saves one life, then that is a victory, whether we know it or not.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things we do also as a group is we support our survivors, and we really give them a voice and a chance to tell their story about their loved one and whatnot. And so that's become an important thing too. And hopefully the more people who hear their stories, the more people who want to join our movement and help. Jaden, do you want to talk about the event that you all are doing on June 5th? Because I think a lot of people here might want to join us for that.
Yeah, so on June 5th, Students Demand Action is doing a virtual run. So you can run/walk or nothing at all, any distance that you like. And all of the profits from the race are going to the Rivertown Action Fund, which is like the parent organization for moms and students.
And I'm sure we'll be splashing it all over social media. We'll all be, taking pictures of ourselves running, walking, rowing, whatever.
Whatever you want to do.
Whatever you want to do.
So how do you sign up for that? Or how do you run, walk, or nothing?
And that's part of our Wear Orange weekend, which is June 4th and 5th and 6th, which is our gun violence awareness weekend. And everybody wears orange, and we have events. The Tappan Zee, the Maurer Bridge will be lit up.
Wow.
You'll see that orange. So when that's orange, that first weekend in June, you'll say, oh yeah, that's right. That's the gun violence thing.
Wow, this is perfect timing for that. I guess that's why they released the film now.
Yeah, it might be.
Or re-released it or whatever. Well, that's really hopeful. That's really amazing. I never suspected that you would come up with a reason for hope at the end in this conversation. I mean, I was hoping you would, but sometimes I feel so defeated about this. But I think what you're saying is true. I know about doing one thing, and your friends will look to you, and that makes you feel grounded and makes you feel like you're moving forward, which you are. I think of a friend of mine who is active on immigration reform, and now all our friends look to her. Okay, what's happening with this issue? What should we be doing? And we ask her for the latest news and advice about what to do. And I can see that happening around this issue, certainly, as well. Is there anything else people want to talk about? Or
go see the film. If you haven't seen the film, I'm making another push for that. It just is so inspiring, and these kids are amazing. They really are. They were and they are, and all that.
They truly are, right? And it's still available on our website, through our website, so you can go to rivertownfilm.org and buy tickets, or your friends can buy tickets. And we have some other good films there too. Bill Trailer, Chasing Ghosts, which is an amazing film about an amazing artist who was born in slavery, and his drawings are fabulous and documents everything that went on during his almost 100-year life in Montgomery, Alabama. Am I forgetting something, Matthew?
Nope, I think, oh, well, there's still a few more days, I think, of the Academy Award nominated short films and animation and documentary and live action, which was a very good year. Sometimes I can't always say that, but this year they are all very fascinating. But I have a question for Jaden. I was wondering, and perhaps you haven't watched the film yet, but if you have, what you thought of the film, and do you know any of those people, since you do have a connection to that school?
So yeah, I didn't finish it. I started it really early in the morning, and then I had to go out. But I watched the beginning and the end. And I thought that what I saw of it was good. And I think it was like a lot of information and stuff that I'd seen like in other films that had been done similarly. But I think that it was really good that it was like so focused on the students and it followed the whole story, because a lot of it just looks at bits and pieces, and I think it's hard to understand really like the thought process and how they get from point A to point B. But it also showed like behind the scenes what was really going on, not just when they were out fighting for the issues and on the floor in the state houses.
And event, I don't know if it was part of what you saw, but they did address the violence in the cities and in schools and among young people. A lot of people, I don't know, we tend to think sometimes that this is a suburban crime that happens, but it's, obviously it affects everyone. And what was your feeling about that? You actually mentioned it earlier yourself.
Yeah, I think it was good that they were able to address and even work with students who experience gun violence in such a different way than them. Because at the end of the day, even if the school shootings and the mass shootings are what's getting the media coverage, the majority of gun violence is either inner city gun violence or acts of individual gun violence. And where that is happening is often affecting the same people over and over again, which is not necessarily the case for school shootings, even if that's what we pay attention to and drives us to want to work for gun violence prevention as a whole.
And I think the other thing that we forget about, unfortunately, is that 40,000 people approximately a year in the United States die from gun violence. 60% of those are suicides. And so, we need to also be doing work to prevent that from happening. And some of that is just making sure people don't have guns. I mean, if you try to commit suicide without a gun, you're like 5 to 10% successful. With a gun, 95%. So if you have a bad day and just a bad moment, like you don't get a do-over on that. And so, if we can make sure that people have their guns locked up, number one, and number two, take them away from people who we think might be a threat to others, that's two things that could hopefully be effective. And states with stronger laws have lower homicide rates and lower suicide by gun rates. So it works. It definitely works.
I think our hope too is that red flag laws that Shari was talking about earlier can make a big difference in that. So if you have somebody that's going through a rough patch, or you're really concerned about your son or your veteran father or whoever that might be, you can get the guns taken away for a temporary period, just to ensure that they are safe and that they don't harm themselves or anybody else.
But it's funny, there's so many myths. So I went in, when we were doing our gun safety workshop in Clarkstown, I went into the gun store on Bardonia Road. I'm in Bardonia on Route 304 to give them flyers. And we started talking. I tried to start up a conversation with these guys who were working there. And they're like, it's not guns, it's mental illness. I was like, well, I don't really think that that's the case, but okay. And they said, you know what? And that law means that my neighbor, if he's pissed at me, he can get my guns taken away. I was like, no, that's actually not how it works. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And then a guy walks in and they go, hey, there's Tom. He's a police officer. He'll tell you that's what can happen. And thankfully, Tom was like, no, that's not what can happen. like it's a very specific thing. It's only your family members, teachers, and law enforcement. So at least thankfully Tom walked in and backed me up. But really that's what these people believe. And I don't know. We can only just try to educate people as much as we can.
Amazing. Okay.
So Matthew's asking how we can learn more about the event in June. Jaden, do you have a link to that? Should I see if I can find one?
Maya is the one that has the link, but I can get that from.
Will that be on the mom's?
It's on our Students Demand Instagram.
Okay.
It'll definitely be on our Facebook page. And you know what? If you're interested and you email me, I can absolutely send that to you. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. I got it.
It's also on Every Town for Gun Safety as an email. The June 4th walk.
Okay.
Oh, that's something different, I think.
Yeah,
That's
well, I was going to say too that if you text orange, the word orange, ORANGE, to 64433, you can find events that are close to you in your area that are happening for Wear Orange. I assume that it's on, Shari, for Students Demand as well.
You know, I don't know. Jaden, did you create an event in Van for this?
Yeah.
So yeah, then it should be. It should be.
Yeah, so that's another option. The word orange to 64433.
And that'll get you in our database, which is good.
Okay, and I see Jaden put a link in there that takes you, that's in the chat now, that takes you to, I don't know what you call it. It's you can buy a t-shirt and raise money that benefits the race.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Our
Now.
word t-shirts on the way today, so I'm excited.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. That, like I said, that was amazing. You're both amazing speakers. I can't thank you enough for coming to talk about this amazing film, and all the other participants too. Where we were going to ask where everybody is from. Joanne, you said you're in New York City. Or people from other parts of the state, or we mostly Rockland County? Is anyone from anywhere else?
I'm from the Hudson Valley. Tara. Hi. I'm
Hi.
also with Moms Demand Action in the Hudson Valley.
That's Rockland is sort of considered Hudson Valley.
Not for moms, not for our thing.
Yeah.
Okay, now I
So
know. We're sort of
Saugerties, I'm in
consistent plan.
Saugerties. the
Yeah, and
Saugerties
it's
area.
very interesting. So we have an Orange County group, and they are trying so hard, but like libraries won't allow them to meet in the library because they're afraid it's controversial. You know, and even you talk about in Rockland County, so when we were doing March for Our Lives in 2018, the kids wanted to do they were trying to figure out how to honor the memories of each of the people who had died. And they talked about ringing a gong, you know, saying the name and having silence and ringing a gong. And we asked the New City Fire Department and they wouldn't let us do it because they were so afraid to be painted in sympathy with crazy gun people. Like, I don't know, but they didn't want to be a part of it. And even that gun safety workshop I was talking about that we did with the town of Clarkstown, the Clarkstown School District superintendent didn't want to be a part of it because he was afraid it might be controversial. So people get, and that was gun safety, pure safety. So people get really funny like that, and they're afraid to look, I don't know.
That must be extremely challenging, right? I mean, we're a nonprofit organization, so we have to be careful not when we don't advocate legislation, we don't advocate for candidates, but we do advocate for discussing difficult issues, but it's tricky.
Yeah, no, I know. And we actually are a 501c3 and a 501c4, so there's very careful ways we need to do things.
Oh, there we go. Muted. Well, we're not muted.
You don't want to be muted. Do. Okay.
There we are, Stu Turner, right?
Oh, okay, Stu, are you going to say have a comment?
No, not really. I just wanted to make sure I was unmuted, or if I did. But no, I'm fine.
Okay.
Jaden's my granddaughter.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And we're always encouraged by her. She's incredible.
Yes, right. She's inspiring. She's inspired us tonight. Thank you. Matthew, are we ready to?
I think Shelley wants to say something.
Oh.
No,
Please.
changed her mind. But yeah, we can, unless anyone else wants to say some last words, or Jaden or Shari or anyone.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about this issue, and thank you for showing the film.
Yeah, tell your friends. It's still going to play for a while. We'll see what happens. It looked like an important one to get out there. We hadn't done anything on the subject before.
And it will give you guys hope if you haven't seen it, to see these kids so active. It just, you know, there's hope in this world.
Yeah.
Thank you for.
We're very encouraged. We're very encouraged by all of this discussion. And
Thank you.
That's amazing. Yeah. And like I said, I never expected to come away with hope, but I have. So thank you very much for making that happen. And thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you for doing this. Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Keep in touch.